Okay, welcome back. Nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. So, today we're going to do our scene meditation again. So the contact, encourage, expand, and notice, like we did the last few days. This time we're going to turn it to compassion. So we talked a little bit about compassion yesterday. Compassion being this empathy. Well, first of all, being a deep caring for someone, which is actually a protection from the suffering when we start to being willing to go into the suffering with someone. That first we have this sense of love and love for them, this caring for this person, and then we recognize that they're going through a difficult time, or that they have the suffering that all of us human beings have, the suffering that the Buddha talked about in terms of all of us are subject to aging, to death, to sickness at some time, that each one of us has a suffering that is pervading our life. And so, be first this caring, and then this empathy, this connection with their suffering. And then this third part is the wishing to remove it. So wanting it to be gone. And that's like just scratching the surface, but at least it gets us in touch with what is compassion. And then through this exercise, we're going to contact it. What does it feel like to feel that combination of things, that deep caring, that empathy, and that wish that the suffering be gone from that person, so that we can start to develop this really, really powerful feeling experience of compassion. So we'll start with a person that we already care about deeply. You can use the same person that we've been using the last 2 days, who's easy, an easy person to care about, and we'll apply this compassion feeling to them, and then we'll switch to someone who we don't know very well. So we'll do it with a stranger, and you can imagine someone, you may not even know the person, but you can imagine someone who's going through a difficult time, as far as losing their job, or in some one of the natural disasters, the flooding that's going on in India, or there's a hurricane that just hit South Texas. There's always people who are having difficulties with environmental factors. So you can just imagine someone who's going through that, or a refugee from a war-torn country. So whoever you contact, or an animal that's being tested on, or something like this, any of these people that we don't know, that we don't usually feel compassion for because we don't know them, we don't have a connection to them. And here with this compassion practice, we're going to be making a connection. So go ahead and set up your posture, and we'll settle in for a minute or two, just getting the mind more inwardly focused and the body relaxed. And you can take some deep breaths to settle in even more, allowing the mind to slow. And then setting a positive motivation that each one of us is engaging in this class putting energy into this class, into this time, for the purpose of developing our own well being, developing our own spiritual growth, developing the qualities that are so necessary in the world of love and compassion and wisdom. That this is why we're here, this is what we're doing. So that we can be present for others and be most skillful in benefiting them. All the way up until our enlightenment and their enlightenment. And this is our motivation. And so bring to mind someone who you care about. Getting their image clearly in your mind, as if they were present here with you now. And notice how easily your heart opens to that being, how a natural feeling of caring arises. And then notice when you imagine their suffering, and they may already have something real that you're aware of, or you know that at some point or in the past or in the future they have suffered. With this basis of deep caring, get in touch with empathy for that person who is going, or that being who is going through a difficult time, having pain or difficulty or challenges in their life. And then notice wanting to remove that, wanting that suffering to stop for that person. And when you notice that, see how it feels within you, within your body, within your being. That strong longing that they be free from that suffering, and that you be the one who takes it away, wanting to take that suffering away from this being who you care for. And then encourage that experience. May you be free from suffering. May you never have difficulties in your life. May I be the one who leads you to that, who serves you in that way. May your life be free, relaxed, joyful. Expanding that feeling of compassion. The awareness of the suffering is there, but at the same time, there's this strong wish for it to be gone. Because you care. And then notice what's happening there. Maybe it's a little bit of a new feeling, this compassion, or maybe there's some fears around it, or it's just unfamiliar. And then bring to mind someone who is more of a stranger to you, who you don't know very well. And it can be an imaginary person who you imagine is present in a suffering situation. And generate this same sense of caring about this being, as if they were your brother or sister or child. And then recognize what they're going through. How sad it must be for them to be experiencing such challenges in their lives. And then immediately this wish, this longing, this even commitment to want to remove this suffering from this being. And then encourage that feeling. May you be free from the suffering. May your problems be solved. May you get the support that you need for your difficulties to end. Expanding and deepening that feeling of compassion. And notice the strength in that wish. I want you not to hurt anymore. And notice what else comes up. And then coming out of the meditation, okay, so let's do some review from yesterday. So we started off yesterday with the new material talking about an independent self. Is there such a thing as an independent self? So let's look at some of those points. So first we talked about the kindness of others. So looking at our experience of who we are, what we are, how we exist, we start to see that in fact we would not exist, we would not be here without the kindness of many, 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 many others. The sources of all our bodily sustenance. The fact that we have a body, that this body was able to grow, got the nutrition that it needed, got the protection that it needed, got the medicine that it needed in order to grow all the way up to become whatever age we are, to become an adult. As human beings, it takes a lot of care, it takes a lot of support, and that wouldn't happen on our own. It would be quite impossible, especially in our modern society, for us to come to full adulthood without the caring of others, even if it was only our family. And our family received support, but we know from what we were talking about that it was many, many others. And then we can talk on a mental level, our minds, all the skills that we were ever taught, all the things we ever saw, or the experiences we ever had with others influence who we are, make us up who we are, and our happiness comes from others. We do have this basic seed, of course, of goodness and love and compassion that is in us. But in order for that to grow, there has to be the conditions. Just like when we're talking about seed that we have planted, the seed can't grow in a vacuum. It needs soil, fertilizer, it needs water, it needs warmth, it needs sun or shade, or whatever, protection from weeds, animals eating it. There have to be the conditions in order for that seed to grow, and that's true of us also. So that's this concept of dependent arising. So this concept of dependent arising is that each one of these phenomena is ourselves, and all of our relative experience, most of it is a dependent, or everything actually is a dependent arising. It is the product of causes and conditions. And so recognizing this, we start to see that in fact we are very much connected to all beings, that the sense of self is much broader than we usually think of. And so this sense of interconnectedness allows us to love others more easily, because they are in essence a part of ourselves. They are not so separate. It's when we start to contract and define ourselves as separate from others that we create distance, we create walls, and that allows for anger, for harmful actions, for jealousy, for pride, for all these delusions that come up that create problems in for ourselves, suffering for ourselves, and for our world. Okay, so then we also talked about the four immeasurables. So the four immeasurables are loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, which is similar to rejoicing, so having a joy in what others are doing, and then equanimity, which is a non-judgmental attitude. It's not saying that this person deserves more love than this person over here, or this being deserves my compassion but this being doesn't. It's having more of an equal view. Okay, and we're going to talk about that today a little more. So some of the things about loving kindness, we tried to start to separate loving kindness from attachment. So loving kindness is this wish for self and others to be happy, which is an interesting definition, I think. It really focuses on the other person. When we say we're in love with someone or we love someone, usually there's a component that includes our connection. Of course, we can have connection with others, and this is very powerful. This is also a big aspect, having a connection with someone, like I know you and you know me, and in that both of us are participating. But when we're talking about love, we're talking about putting the focus on the other person, on what they want, on what is important to them. And sometimes attachment and romantic love, sometimes depending, um, can have this component of, and what are you going to do for me? How are you making me feel? And so we're trying to sort of tease out this difference between love with no strings attached, love without expectation, and then love where we do have some expectation, where we want the other person to make us happy, and that's what we call love. So trying to figure that out, teasing that out. So love from this perspective, I want you to be happy without expectations and without a grasping at permanence. So grasping at permanence has to do with the fact that things change, that things are constantly changing. And when we grasp at permanence, we expect people and beings to be exactly the same. We want them to stay the same because we enjoyed, when we fall in love with them, we enjoyed them and they made us happy. So we want them to stay the same. And we grasp onto that, trying to keep them the same, instead of recognizing that things are constantly changing. And this constant process of letting go, learning to let go of people, learning to let go of ourselves in a certain moment, allowing ourselves to be someone different all the time, no problem. The far enemy, of course, the very opposite of loving kindness, is harmful intent, wanting to hurt someone. And the near enemy is selfish attachment, which looks like love. That's why we call it a near enemy, but it is actually not love in the way that we are defining it here. Okay. So then compassion, we also talked about this wish for self and others to be free from suffering. And then we're not focusing on fixing someone, because that would assume that they are broken. And where we're coming from with a compassionate attitude is an understanding that everyone has Buddha potential, and everyone has this ability to heal themselves, to work through their problems with the proper support, with the proper conditions. And so we become a server. We become someone who will help their own seeds grow, who will help them. And it's hard, this helping, word helping, I use it interchangeably. So I'm sorry if that's confusing. Sometimes in helping relationships, there is still this sense of pride. The helper is the one who is above the person being helped. And so we're trying to get rid of that. So this idea of serving someone becomes more about the person recognizing that whoever they are benefiting, let's use that, whoever they are benefiting knows what they need, knows what support and help they need. And when we're serving and when we're benefiting, we're helping that person to grow within themselves. So it takes out this whole issue of dependence. We're not trying to make people dependent on us when we're acting in compassionate ways. And like I talked about just now in this meditation, this deep caring is actually a protective factor, because sometimes when we start feeling other beings suffering, we suffer too. We can get very overwhelmed with the suffering in the world, and that paralyzes us. And this is what I talked a little bit about, that vicarious traumatization, when we start to feel traumatized because we are so in touch with someone else's suffering, and it's as if we are experiencing the suffering ourselves. So in order to protect from that, we have this sense of deep caring, of love, and that is actually not only a protective factor, but it's a factor of joy, of happiness, of because we care so much. And it also, the other aspect of compassion is this strength. And simply because I feel compassion for you, I I recognize that you can help yourself, and I am empowered to do whatever it takes, because there is hope there. Um, and we're going to talk about fear of compassion. One of the things that happens with really strong compassion, when people feel very sensitive and overwhelmed, is that they feel very helpless and very hopeless when they get only into the suffering, when they don't remember the connection to someone, the deep caring that they have, and when they don't remember this Buddha nature aspect. And then the far enemy is cruelty, so the opposite of it. And then the near enemy is pity. So pity, thinking I'm better than everybody else, which creates this wall. I'm up here and this suffering person is down here, less than me. So let's talk about equanimity. So equanimity has these 4 aspects, and I'm sure it has lots of others too, but this is just the main ones I was thinking about. So not labeling of people as friend, enemy, or stranger. Recognizing that actually all beings want to be happy and don't want suffering. And it comes from this ability to take another person's point of view, to actually put ourselves in someone else's shoes from their point of view. And it is also recognizing how we project onto others our own feelings. So first of all, this labeling that we do is that we often will, when someone is nice to me, when we share the same interests, when I feel good in their presence, then I label them my friend. Okay? Because my experience of being with them, of having them in my life, is good. It feels good. It makes me feel good to be with this person. So that person is a friend. Now, someone else who annoys me, who upsets me, who hurts people that I love, who I see as making foolish decisions for themselves and others, that person makes me feel bad. I don't like being around them. They irritate me, or they upset me, or they make me angry, or they make me feel hurt. That person then we label. I mean, we don't necessarily consciously say that person is my enemy, but we do have an orientation toward them that wants to reject them and move away from them and push them away, because when we're in their presence, well, because of what they're doing or who they are, that we don't feel good. And then a stranger is someone who we don't really have any connection to. We don't really know who they are, and they don't really affect us in any way. They don't really have anything to do with our life. So then we label them as stranger, and we're pretty indifferent. We don't really care. And that's the majority of beings in the world. So with bodhicitta, what we're doing is we're starting to expand our circle from the only being the people who make us feel good to include many, many more beings, even people who harm us, even people who don't make us feel good, even people who we don't feel anything about yet, who we don't really have a connection to. So with bodhicitta, we're expanding our circle. And so, what this involves, one of the processes of developing this equanimity, is that we have to take our point of view out of being it's about me, how I feel, to how are they feeling? What is their point of view? What do they want? Okay. And what we recognize from what the teachers have told us, and then we get to explore and examine ourselves, is this concept that all beings want to be happy and don't want suffering. That no matter how they treat me, no matter what they're doing in their lives, no matter whether I like them or not, what they're trying to figure out is how to be happy, how to have joy, and how not to have problems, how not to have difficulties. And this sounds very, I don't know, I think it's something that we need to contemplate, that we need to analyze, because we know when we start looking at our own lives that we're day to day, hour after hour, trying to figure out how to be more comfortable, how to be more secure, how to be less lonely, all these things. We're trying to solve our problems day after day and doing it the best way we can, not always being successful, of course. And then recognizing that every single other being is also doing the same thing. And even when what it looks like is that they're hurting themselves or they're hurting others, they're actually just trying to be happy. They're just trying to figure it out, how to bring happiness to themselves and how not to suffer. Even very confused people, even very ignorant people who do things that we look are really blatantly, intentionally harming others, somehow think it's going to make them happy. This is their solution to their suffering in their life, is to hurt others. Sometimes that's what's happening. So then our understanding, our compassion for those beings can grow, and recognizing our connection, that all beings equally in this way want to be happy and don't want suffering. So that's the taking on another's point of view. And then recognizing our projections is a process that we sometimes have where we have rejected certain parts of ourselves that were unacceptable, where maybe we were taught, or maybe we decided at some point in our life that that kind of person is not okay, and I am not that kind of person. So then we see that in others. We see someone who is irresponsible, or looking for fame, or whatever it is, trying to be better than everybody else and show off, right? That's just an example. And then we condemn that person. Again, we project onto them something that we haven't recognized is also an aspect of ourselves. And so this is it's a psychological process. It's something that Jung really identified was powerful for people when we bury these. So how we do this in actuality is when we have a relationship with someone who annoys us, who really, really gets on our nerves, and they're not necessarily harming us directly, and they're not harming others directly. I mean, then we might want to set some boundaries, but for some reason, they just bug us. For some reason, we don't want to be around that person. They're irritating. Sometimes what we have to look at is, what is it about that person that is inside of us that is really triggering us? And so they can be a real catalyst for us to do some of our own self-exploration. And when we recognize that we are just like them, we have dealt with this issue. Maybe we've dealt with it in the past, and now we don't want to deal with it anymore. It's a part of ourselves that we're not accepting, that we recognize that's a tendency in us as well, and we're not accepting it. I had a friend who was very pleasing, a people pleaser, really, especially with my supervisor. He was, always trying to, get her a cup of tea and take care of her and make sure she's fine, and, just really endearing himself to her. And that was really hard for me, even though it didn't have anything really to do with me. It wasn't like my job was threatened in any way, but it was so difficult for me to be around him when he was doing that. And it probably came from a sense of not feeling strong within himself, not having a sense of self-love and self-worth that was separate from other people's approval. And I had to really look at that in myself, and how I had been working with that and trying to develop that. And when I saw that in someone to this really strong extent, I didn't want to be around it. So instead of feeling compassion and connection for this person who I felt, I was feeling the same way, it was part of me I didn't like, I projected it on him and then rejected him. And so this is and it's good information. Our enemies are just amazingly helpful to us in so many ways. Okay, so that's this equanimity, starting to treat others equally, not rejecting, not preferring, and not being indifferent to. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was fear of compassion. So sometimes, I know one thing that was very true that I have seen is that people can feel very overwhelmed when they start developing compassion for more and more beings. When we start to grow our compassion, we start to pull back in some ways, because it can feel so overwhelming, because we can really get in touch with this hopeless feeling. And sometimes also compassion is seen as weak, that if you're a compassionate person, then you aren't really very strong. You're sort of, as for men, sometimes it's like you aren't masculine if you have compassion for others, that you're somehow weak. And this may come from this belief that if I am compassionate, it's the same as letting people walk all over me, being a doormat, they call it. People will use me. That if I'm, and that's where we get this concept of idiot compassion, where we don't bring in our wisdom along with the compassion. So allowing someone to use you is not compassionate because it doesn't benefit that other person. It makes that other person believe that it's okay for them to use others. So someone who is constantly borrowing money and never paying it back, and you never say anything to them, you never stop them, you never say no, you never say, when are you going to pay me back? This is idiot compassion. Maybe for a short time it helps them out financially, but it doesn't do anything as far as developing the qualities of respect, of responsibility. And it's only when we set boundaries with compassion that we see that it's actually about benefiting that other person. Saying, okay, I'm going to give you this money and I expect you to pay it back in this amount of time. And then when they don't, asking them for it kindly, gently, in order to help them, in order to teach them. Or we say no. We say, I'm sorry. I gave you money before and you didn't pay it back. And I really don't feel it's a good idea for us to get into this kind of relationship. And sometimes it can really deepen the relationship if you're doing it from a place of caring about that person. So not allowing them to abuse you, not allowing them to use you is actually more compassionate than just idiot compassion, giving them whatever they want. Sometimes we think people will become dependent, that if we are constantly solving their problems for them, then yes, they're going to become dependent. They are not going to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. They're not going to learn how to solve their own problems. And of course, if they're really in a, they have lots of problems, then we may help them with some of them, and some of them we have expectations that they step up, that they do the steps necessary. So yes, I will take you to the store, but next time I want you to call this other friend, or I want you to take the bus, or whatever it is that, or I want you to walk, or I want you to shop, whatever it may be. There's always ways in which we can be benefiting people, doing things for them, and at the same time nourishing them to not be so dependent on us, to hold them accountable, to ask them to step up. Sometimes we feel like we can't tolerate others' distress. We can take a look at this. So we can't take it. Their pain is just too much, and we have to get away from it. So we have to look more deeply at what exactly is the most difficult part about being with that person's pain. What is it that is so difficult for us? And usually it's because we feel helpless, that we can't change it, that we can't take their suffering away. Like someone who's who's very ill and dying. We can't stop that process sometimes. The doctors are doing whatever they can, but it's just out of our control. It's, something we have to accept because we can't change it. One of the things that we can do in that situation is be present with that person's pain, with them, because being with them helps them. Simply being present with them, holding their hand, connecting with them, helping them know that they're not alone is helping. So we are not helpless in that situation. We are actually helping by being present. even though we can't take it away completely, simply by being there, simply by caring about them, it is helping, it is benefiting. Sometimes we have a view that people should help themselves. We kind of talked about that with this dependency thing, or people will use me. We aren't necessarily condoning other people's actions. Like when we think some people don't deserve our compassion, we aren't saying that this person, what they're doing is okay. We're recognizing that equanimity thing that we were just talking about, that all beings want to be happy and don't want suffering, and that everyone does deserve our compassion, because when they're doing these negative things, they're creating suffering for themselves just as much as they're creating, and if not more, for others. From a Buddhist point of view, when we're looking at it from a karmic point of view, when we talk about people who are in suffering situations, and let's say, for example, an abusive relationship, we have someone who is abusing and someone who is being abused. The abuser is suffering, okay? They're in a bad place, hurting others, but they're also creating the causes to continue to hurt others and to continue to be hurt in the future. Now, the person who is being abused actually has the opportunity to finish that karma, to be done with it, to experience the suffering, and then to let it go, to get free of it. Okay, so the abuser is actually creating more suffering for themselves, so they deserve as much compassion than the person who is being observed. I'm not saying less or more, but I am saying just as much. So someone who is being abused deserves our compassion. We want to remove their suffering. And someone who is doing the abusing also deserves our compassion. So this is where we start to look at responding to people with anger, with wanting to harm them because they're harming others, doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense to have compassion for them, and not idiot compassion, not excusing them, but to believing that they can change and trying to be the conditions that will help them find that quality within themselves that is going to stop abusing others. Okay, so let's do a little poll. So here you're going to have like a window pop up in front of you. Are you ready, Felipe?
I think so. Let's try it out. I'm going to
Okay,
look the polling.
so choose one. You read the question and then choose one of the answers. And we'll see. So what is your resistance to compassion? People will use me. I will be seen as weak. People should help themselves. People will become dependent, or some people don't deserve compassion. So choose the one that is strongest for you, that you feel like is your biggest reason for resisting being compassionate, doing compassionate acts. So once you get close to 100, if you 100%, if you could show us the results.
Sure. We're at 66 right now, 68.
Okay, so a few more people vote.
All right. It seems it stopped at 81%.
Perfect.
Okay. Should I wait a couple seconds more if anyone can cast their vote?
No,
Yeah.
let's see it
Okay.
now.
All right.
Yep.
Should I read the results, Venerable, or do you want me to show them?
We want to show them.
Okay. Let me see. I'll end the polling. Okay, there we go. Share results.
Okay.
Can you see them?
Interesting. So 25% people will use me. 11 people, I will be seen as weak. 14 people should help themselves. 22 people will become dependent. And 28, some people don't deserve compassion. Interesting. So spread out pretty much. But the first one and the last one being the strongest. I was surprised when I did this because I chose some people don't deserve compassion because that's where I stopped myself. And I think it's good to see. It was like new for me. I was like, okay, really looking at these ones. What is the strongest for me? Very interesting. Okay, so let's move on. One more topic I want to talk about today. So this is a technique that is typically, or it's a traditional meditation technique for developing this bodhicitta attitude. So remember, the bodhicitta attitude is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering in order to and in order for them to be free from suffering, to become fully enlightened, I am going to get enlightened myself. So this is the attitude or the realization that we are developing. So we pray this as if you've taken refuge, if you say the refuge prayer in Buddhism, you know that we say, we talk about this, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all beings. And we say this like 3 times a day, every day. And but actually it's getting to a point where that intention is a realization, meaning that it is something that we are aware of, well, not necessarily in our awareness, but it influences our thinking every moment of every day, that it's something that that is present for us. Kind of like the realization that water is wet. Water is wet. You have an experience of water being wet. You don't question water being wet. And you don't even have to ask yourself, is water wet? You just know it. This is a realization of the wetness of water, okay? And we want to get to this realization of bodhicitta, this constant, all of our actions, all of our life being based on, with this motivation, with this intention. So we start to grow it, just like we're talking about deepening a caring heart. We're growing this bodhicitta motivation. And one of the meditations we can do is called the 7-point cause and effect. So it's the first 6 points, and then the 7th point is the bodhicitta, this realization. So let's take a look at the first 3 steps. So the first step is that we see all beings as having been our mother. So this is based on this understanding that we have had infinite past lives, that our consciousness is beginningless. So we have been being reborn again and again and again, over and over. One of the images for recognizing this is an understanding that if we piled up all the bones of all the bodies that we've ever inhabited, it would like reach to the sky. So this image of this huge pile of our past bodies starting to get us less attached to this body. We've had lots of bodies, and because we have had lots of bodies, we've had lots of people who gave us those bodies, or animals who gave us those bodies. So this is being based on being born from a womb, okay, or eggs. Recognizing, sometimes not necessarily eggs, it depends on the relationship of the mother to the young, but all beings have been one's mother. This is this understanding, if we have infinite past lives, then everyone has had the opportunity to be our mother, as well as our father, as well as our brother or our sister or our child or our neighbor, or, we've had all these relationships, very close relationships with every single being that exists in the universe. We have had this powerful, close relationship with those beings. And the only reason we don't recognize it right now is because we don't remember them. We don't remember our past lives, so we don't remember when they were our mother. And of course, they look differently. They have a new body too. But this is this understanding that everyone has been this way. So then this sense of caring becomes easier. Like I care for my mother of this life, or like I cared for my father of this life, I can recognize that in others, that I have felt this way about others, and I have had this connection to every single being. So everyone that I meet has been my mother. I have loved them and they have loved me. They have wanted me to be happy. They have sacrificed things for me. And then the second one is remembering their kindness. And we do this for the mother because it's easy. It's usually people are closer to their mothers when they're young, of course, more than their fathers. But it depends. I mean, especially in our modern culture, sometimes there are two dads, or two moms, or and so we remember the kindness of all these beings, and what it takes when we're babies in order for us to grow up and become adults. It takes a lot of kindness for our caretakers. There's a lot of sacrifice involved. I know when I was younger, we didn't have a lot of money. My father was just developing his career, and they had four of us children. And I just remember when we bought our first home, that was like a dream home for my parents. And it was just amazing. I still love that home. And I know that my father worked so hard to create that house for us. And just remembering that, and I, at the time, of course, it was fun, I liked having my own room with my sister, and like it was, and we had a backyard that was pretty exciting too. And just remembering that each being cared about us in that way, and the sacrifices that were involved. And I think too about my sister, and she didn't sleep. My nephew was not a sleeper. He didn't like to sleep that much. He would just stay awake all the time. And she stayed up with him until he would go to sleep. And I mean, she spent like about 10 or 11 years of like not sleeping, to take care of her child. And this is so kind. And then wishing to repay that kindness becomes this, okay, you have been so kind to me. I care about you. Now, what am I going to do? And this results in this great love, what we call great love. Great meaning that it's not just for our friends and family of this life, but it expands this immeasurable love. And when we care about others, we have deep compassion for them. With, I love you. I want you to be happy. I don't want you to suffer. I'm going to do anything I can for your suffering to stop. So then the next one, the supreme thought of taking responsibility, is actually this decision that I am going to devote my actions, my life, my work, everything to removing that suffering from all beings, because I care about them deeply, because I love them. I want them to be happy. And so this starts to grow this feeling for every being. And then the supreme thought of, I'm going to be the one who is going to do it. I'm not just going to sit back here and feel compassion for you and want your suffering not to be there. I am going to take responsibility. And then the result, then the seventh step, is this bodhicitta, the wish that all beings be free from suffering, and that the very best way that I can do this is by becoming a Buddha. That an enlightened being is the most powerful, most skillful, the best being. And in the process, of course, as I develop, I am benefiting lots of beings as I'm becoming a bodhisattva, all the way up into Buddhahood, that I am benefiting so many beings. But I know that the more I develop myself, my qualities of love, of strength, of courage, of willingness to help others, of skill, of doing it well, bringing this wisdom in. The more I develop those qualities, the more beneficial I can be, the more I can be one of those conditions that allows others to grow and become Buddhas themselves. Okay, so let's stop there. And we'll do a discussion group. So the question is about, same as the poll, what stops you from feeling or acting on compassion? So what stops you from feeling or acting on compassion? And Felipe will type the question in the group so you can see it on the top of your screen. Okay, 10 minutes.
Right. I'm starting them now.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, so we have a special event coming up in 20 minutes. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is going to be broadcasting a talk on compassion and then doing some Q&A with Tibetan youth. Is that right? Tibetan youth or Indian youth?
I think it's Indian youth, Madam.
Indian youth.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go right into meditation now and do meditation for the next 20 minutes up until 9 o'clock our time. And then we're going to stop class then so you can switch over to watching the Dalai Lama. And Felipe just put up the link there, dalailama.com/live, if you want to continue watching him teach on compassion. So so we can do, if you have questions that you weren't able to get answered today, ask them tomorrow or put them in the chat tomorrow and we'll get to them tomorrow. But for now, we're going to do the meditation and then you can watch His Holiness.
All right. So thank you, Venerable. And let's get started. Set up your posture. We'll jump right into the meditation so then we can watch His Holiness. All right. So as usual, let's begin by developing a steady and very calm body. Go of any tension, and to do this briefly, you can take 3 very deep breaths, letting go of all the air and then inhaling deeply and fully, completely filling up the lungs to their full capacity, and then just letting go of that air, allowing it to naturally be released, and with it, letting go of all tension, all agitation, all tightness. And so now we let go of observing the body, we just simply let it rest in its natural state. And we're going to go through the 7-point cause and effect method for developing bodhicitta. We do this on the basis of equanimity. And in order to develop that, you can bring to mind a stranger, a loved one, and a disagreeable person. Going one by one, putting yourself in their shoes and realizing that just like yourself, these people want to be happy and to be free of suffering. That we share that common ground. And developing equanimity for these three people, you can then expand it, extend it towards all beings. Thinking how everyone wants to be happy and free of suffering. And then we start with the first step, which is understanding that all sentient beings have been our mother. Allowing your mind to move around and whoever comes to mind, whether an individual or a group of people, try to come to this understanding that each one of them have been your mother. Thinking every single one of these people have been my mother not once, but countless times. And then the next step is recognizing your kindness. First, starting with your mother of this life, you can begin by thinking how your mother carried you in the body for over 9 months and then gave birth to you, which is a very painful and difficult process, which your mother had to endure and did it happily just to give the life that you have right now. Regardless of your relationship with her at this point, at least that part is true. You are alive now, and that is because of the kindness of your mother. And then just take a moment to reflect on the kindness that was shown to you by your mother or other caregivers as you were growing. When we were kids, we were quite vulnerable. So these people protected us from cold, from harm, helped us when we couldn't walk or chew our food, nourished us. They got up in the middle of the night just to feed us, being sleep deprived, cared for us in so many ways. Taught us so many things. Take a moment to appreciate all this. Letting that warmth and that love of your mother or caregiver to come into your heart. And extending this feeling to all beings. Understanding that they have all been our mothers countless times, provided us with measureless happiness, protected us from harm, and that without them, we couldn't have survived. And from there we go into the third point, which is wishing to repay their kindness, thinking, wow, how amazing. All of these beings have been so kind to me. Now I see that everything that I have is because of others. So generate this feeling of gratitude. And acknowledging all the love that you've received from sentient beings, you will develop a strong wish to repay them, to return the kindness, to repay it. And this gives rise to this feeling of affection and love. From that sense of gratitude, we develop a sense of closeness, of pure love to arise. Seeing all sentient beings as endearing, close and dear to you, allow your heart to open up to them and embrace them. Perceiving all beings in a beautiful, glowing way, just like a mother would view their child. Arouse the thought how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings would have happiness in their causes. And then generating great compassion, developing this caring attitude that wants all sentient beings to be free from suffering. seeing that they are stuck in the darkness of ignorance, swept away in the ocean of samsara, giving rise to the wish for each and every sentient being to be free from suffering. Open your heart and view all sentient beings in the same way a mother would feel when she sees her only child in pain, immediately wishing to remove that suffering. And then the special attitude, thinking I don't want them to just have pleasure. I want them to have lasting happiness, genuine happiness. And if I want them to be happy, then I myself really need to look after them. Imagine you're in a position of saving a person from falling off a cliff. In this way, generate a deep sense of responsibility to save that person. And then you can extend that sense, that feeling for all sentient beings. No matter what it takes, I myself would liberate all sentient beings from samsara by myself alone. Which brings us to the last step, the result of bodhicitta, the supreme mind of enlightenment. Having developed that superior intention, wanting to free all sentient beings by ourselves, ask yourself, at the moment, am I really capable to achieve this goal? To eliminate all the suffering of all sentient beings and bring them to happiness? At this moment, am I able to bring even one sentient being to that state? How can I possibly do that? How can I make it come true? And we come to the understanding that only we'll be able to do that if we first ourselves become enlightened. So giving rise to this strong determination, this supreme aspiration, no matter what, I will obtain the peerless and perfect state of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And slowly coming out of the meditation. So briefly take a moment to offer and dedicate the merit of the session. And we're right on the time. I think His Holiness has already started streaming, so please join into that and enjoy the session and the conversation with His Holiness. Thank you so much.
Yes, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.